Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 156. I'm your host today, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the globe, the universe, other worlds, the space station, wherever they are. We are celebrating them here at Hooked on Wooden Boats. Welcome to the podcast today, folks. Glad you're tuning in. We're going to have some fun as usual today. Featured segment is an interview with Jay Smith of Anacortes, Washington, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, this podcast today is sponsored by my friends at Duckworks Boatbuilding Supply in Harper, Texas. Chuck and Sandra have an online business selling boat supplies, parts, repairs, plans, kits, sales. If you're building or repairing or thinking about building a boat or need supplies for a boat or need some screws or some resin or maybe some tools, hand tools, things like that, they have it there. And they've got great prices, excellent customer service. It's a home business, made in USA business, and I would appreciate it if you would support them. You can go to their website by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/duck. That'll take you to the landing page for Hooked on Wooden Boats customers of Chuck and Sandra's at Duckworks. And check it out, folks. Really, it's a great place to buy stuff, and it's a type of business I do like to support. So best of luck and best of business to you in 2015, Chuck and Sandra. Thanks for being a sponsor of the podcast. This past week, I did a little more work on my table saw in my garage. And I'm getting it cleaned up, rewired it, and I'm putting on a brand new fence right now. I just started that tonight. I also finished wiring in my garage. I wired in a 220 outlet for a Dimplex portable construction heater, which I'm hanging from the wall. Which really, in a two-car garage, it heats very well. Really warms the place up. And then I put in a dedicated 20-amp circuit for my table saw because the circuit in the garage, it was already there, has a lot of stuff on it. It's just the power is not real clean, you're not getting a lot of amperage to the unit. So it's nice to have a dedicated outlet. So I got that done this week. So I feel like I'm making some progress. This past week, I recorded 5 or 6. I think I recorded actually 6 interviews, 5 over the phone, 1 in person. Had a blast doing it. Connected with some people up in Vancouver, British Columbia. Did some interviews there. And did an interview with a gentleman at Deer Harbor on Orcas Island in Washington State. And then I visited my friend Jay Smith in Anacortes, Washington, and did an interview with him yesterday. So this podcast is going to be about the interview with Jay. Jay's a Nordic boat builder, and he was trained in Norway. He's from the U.S. originally, but he spent several years apprenticing in Norway, learning about boat building. He's studied boat building. He's gone to the museums there, read the literature, built the boats, connected with the best people in the world. He's a clinker Viking expert and a really great guy. And this is the third or fourth interview I've done with Jay. So when I got to Jay's shop this week, we talked for probably about an hour about what he's been up to, which is a lot of really cool stuff, traveling and working on different boats and things. And then we talked about, what should we talk about on the podcast today? And a topic that's been on my mind is really talking about the virtues and benefits and aesthetic value and the romance of wooden boats, why people carry on the tradition, what's so special about it, what gets them up in the morning to work on a boat, why don't they just do fiberglass? And it's kind of a fun topic. So it's a little bit more on the philosophical side. But also, Jay's really good on history, so he talks about the history of boats and stuff in this interview. So I think you're going to enjoy it. He's very knowledgeable. We had a really fun time doing this, so let's roll the tape. Take it away, Jay. It is January 13th, 2015. I am in the shop of Jay Smith in Anacortes, Washington. Jay, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Jay and I first did a podcast shortly after I started in 2011, and we've done one or two since then, and it's really been a lot of fun. And for those of you that don't know Jay, he's a traditional boat builder trained in Norway, has done a lot of Nordic boat building, clinker construction, very talented guy, and he's got a really cool shop here in Anacortes. And how long have you been here, Jay, in Anacortes at this place?
Quarter of a century, a little bit more.
Wow.
So it's home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a really cool shop here. I've taken some pictures and a wood stove. And Jay, you collect vintage tools also.
I do. I can't let them be. If I find them and they're available, I snatch them up.
Yeah.
And they're very useful. They're wonderful. Old tools are, sometimes they need a little bit of attention to bring them back, but in most cases they're still in, a lot of them are still in very good condition and do the work just as well today as they did when they were new. So I like to collect and then tune them up and use them if I can, if I have given the time.
Yeah.
It's just another fetish of mine is the old tools. And really, in a lot of this construction, we try to use the old tools as much as possible because that's the way these boats were built, was before power, before electricity, when everything was done with axes and draw knives and spoke shaves. And so to build these boats without those tools would not be traditional.
Yeah.
Really wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. I'm just curious if you have one or two of favorite vintage tools that you've acquired over the years. Anything stand out? Well,
the real workhorse in this kind of boat building is the Bailey number 4, number 5, the hand planes. Before that, they were wooden bodied planes, each built by the individual builder. And spoke shaves are an integral part of this work. You can't build these boats without spoke shaves. Those were also wooden, boxwood originally, or some sort of hardwood, with a blade, with a knife held just by friction in the old spoke shaves. And then Stanley and Bailey bumped that up a bit and began making cast iron spoke shaves. And the 151s are marvelous tools. Have several of them and wouldn't be without them.
What size planes are those, Jay?
They're the ones that look like a bird.
Oh, okay.
Look like a bird in flight.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a spoke shave.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also draw knives, which is really very much very similar to a spoke shave, only the cutting edge is longer and larger and removes much more wood quickly.
What's the oldest tool you have, Jay, that you're aware of? We're getting off topic here. It's kind of fun to talk about.
I think there are some planes here from the early 1800s, I know.
Wow.
1820, 1830. Some Scottish planes that I know are that old.
Wow.
And then a couple of very old ones from Norway that certainly are 200 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So we had a little discussion before we started the record button here, decided we'd talk about kind of the virtues and benefits of wooden boats and why people continue to build wooden boats when 95% of boats built today, or 99%, are built of other material like fiberglass and aluminum and different things. So kind of a philosophical discussion, Jay. So maybe give us your thoughts of why you do what you do and what's special about it.
Well, boats were built of wood originally. We can go back even to some cultures where boats were built of whatever material was at hand. Reed boats in Polynesia, skin boats in many parts of the world. The curraghs of Ireland were built of ox hides. But the majority of boats were built of wood because our planet is densely covered with forests for the most part, and so wood was available to most cultures. And anywhere along the coast where the forest met the sea, it was a natural to build the boats with the wood that was available. And people, of course, used the indigenous materials that they had. They didn't travel to seek out better materials. They used what they had. And they also used animal, the hides, but they would use fur and wool from sheep and animal byproducts in the construction of the hulls to tighten them, using wool in the seams and that sort of thing, and then using horsehair for lines. For standing rigging in Scandinavia was fairly common 10 centuries ago. So wooden boats have been a part of coastal communities for thousands of years. It was a natural. And I know I've been oftentimes amazed because I love to, when I travel, I love to visit island communities. They seem to have very, very vibrant histories because the people who survived in island communities really had to be self-sufficient and have a tremendous amount of ingenuity to survive out in the islands. Very resourceful. I think in many ways more so than people who lived on the mainland because they didn't have everything at their fingertips that the people on the mainland might have access to. And in those island communities, they used the woods, they used as we mentioned, the animal byproducts, and because they were surrounded by the sea, boats were an absolute necessity for survival. All of those communities, of course, naturally are fishing communities, and survived largely upon the fish from the sea, as well as maybe the sheep that they grazed on the grasslands and that sort of thing. So visiting island communities is always enlightening and enriching to research the history of the people and how they use those natural resources, and created a type of vessel for each island community. There was a style of boat that was best suited to those fisheries surrounding the islands, and that was easy to row and sail and launch, and suited nicely to either the calm waters surrounding them or the sometimes very, very rough waters in some small island communities. So wood was a natural because they had the trees, and once the Iron Age blossomed, they were able with axes and hand tools to produce really some pretty phenomenal small boats with iron and wood, and not much more.
What year was the Iron Age, Jay? I'm not a great historian. When did that all happen?
Typically we think of the Bronze Age as being at its height about 1000 BC, and then the Iron Age beginning shortly after that. So 600 BC, iron was being smelted, and iron ore, and iron was being smithed in Central Europe, and the Iron Age took off quickly after that. And so the Iron Age was just before the time of Christ, and then certainly into the last 2 centuries. So the Iron Age, the Roman occupation of England was, those 400 years were the very much in the middle of the Iron Age, and it was the Iron Age that enabled the Vikings to build their ships using axes and hand tools, which they would not have had 1,000 years earlier, and also for rivets and roves, iron fastenings in the ships themselves.
Yeah. So Jay, when you were early in your life, I think in your early 20s, you got attracted to boat building, traditional boat building, and so what was it about that drew you to that might not draw other people? Because obviously not everybody's drawn to that. What was in it for you, and yeah, just tell us about that.
It seems to me that as young people, we, at least in my group, and when I was in college, we were a rebellious lot, and we questioned authority, and we were not willing to readily accept what our elders told us, and somewhat skeptical, and also viewed the older generations as old-fashioned and on their way down the slope. And we were the upcoming, right? We were the brains, and
that's right. We knew it all.
We knew what was important, and we didn't need those folks. But I soon recognized, as I grew a little bit older, in my mid-20s, I recognized that there was a certain amount of wisdom there in the older generations and the old ways of doing things that was not to be scoffed at. And the more I spent time with older folks, the more I began to appreciate what they knew, and to accept the fact that there was a lot that I didn't know. And I think spending some time in a foreign country is invaluable in those early developmental years, and it removes you from your own culture and society, and enables a person to transcend the world that one has been raised in and view it from a different perspective. And then also there's something charming about living in a culture, in a different language, learning different traditions. And I can speak for myself. I was very open to learning new traditions, learning a new language. And so when I was in these developmental years in my 20s and found myself in Norway, all of these new impressions and traditions and ideas came to me, and I was open to them. And when I began to learn about wooden boats in Norway, which has an extremely strong tradition over 1,500 years, I could see in an instant that this was something this was a tradition that had great depth and meaning, and that it had evolved over many, many, many generations into something that was not only very functional but also very beautiful, and that an awful lot of forethought and artistry had been built into the development of these boats. It seemed self-evident. Just looking at the boats, rowing the boats, sailing them. The function was amazing. They were very light, they sailed beautifully, and they were lovely to look at. So I was really taken by those elements of wooden boats in Norway, not really thinking about a career path or that it was anything I might pursue seriously, but it took me. And over a fairly short period of time, I was so taken by it that I made a point to make contacts and return to Norway and learn the trade in a early apprenticeship there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many years did you spend there total with your boat building activities?
2.5 years boat building, another year studying language and culture, and been back and forth many times.
Yeah.
Always learning more.
What kind of life lessons do you think you learned from the boat builders you worked with over there?
Well, I think the probably one of the least expected, but in perhaps one of the most valuable, was humility. I was fortunate to apprentice to a man who essentially had no ego. He just was a boat builder. But he was a many-talented fellow. He still is. He still is alive, in his 90s now. He was an artist in many ways outside of boat building. A musician, a vocalist, and instrumental musician, sharpshooter, an excellent cross-country skier, a painter, and a boat builder of the first class. His boats were known in that region as being some of the most beautiful. And he had a lot of competition. There were many, many boat works in that region, but his stood out for the beauty of their lines, the shape of the hull. He just had an amazing eye for lines and balance and scantlings.
Was he building his own designs, or kind of taking a design and building it the way he would build it, or what was he doing there, Jay?
Boat building was evolving rapidly in the 20th century. Of course, the beginning of the end of the age of sail and the beginning of power changed everything. As soon as engines came on the scene, hull shapes changed and boat construction changed to accept engines. And so following World War II, boat designs in Norway changed because of engines and because of prosperity. People were in more of a position to own a recreational boat to use when they weren't commercially fishing, but for their own pleasure and family, and fishing just for their own consumption. And so power boats with small cabins became the rage, and so there were small boat works that were producing dozens of those a year. Just a small crew of a handful of men, but building one boat a month, 24 to 30 footers, lapstrake, all wooden boats with a single diesel inboard. And that's what Nils and Asboye were, Ulset Boat Byggeri, that's what was being built there when I joined them. And
the power boats, huh?
Power boats is what they were building. Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
And they were of his design. He he had developed his own designs from 21 feet to 30 feet off the top of his head, essentially. Never gone to school for it, just had an eye. And began building, and then developed more and larger, and sketched almost napkin sketch of a house on top. That would look pretty good. Build it. So really just inspired off the top of the head, if you will.
Yeah.
But to return to life lesson, I think the humility really struck me. The fact that he didn't view it as anything out of the ordinary. His neighbors were farmers, and they should receive just as much respect for being good farmers as he should receive for being a good boat builder. No difference in his eye. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. Just humility, a certain amount of course, pride and pleasure in completion of his work and seeing his boats on the water. They would make him smile, of course, when he saw boats of his own in town or working its way up the fjord, and he recognized one of his own. But he would never say anything about it. So it's just a remarkable fellow.
Yeah. What about the work ethic? What was that like?
It was extremely solid work ethic in the shop where I apprenticed. Very little chat. To work on time, regardless of the weather or the darkness. This was at the 62nd parallel. So it's quite far north, and in the winter there was some days 3.5 hours of daylight. So you'd begin work in the dark and get a little bit of daylight in the middle of the day around lunch, and then end the work in the dark. And it was cold. It would be 0 Fahrenheit oftentimes in the middle of the winter. So it was tough. But not a word about that. It was just given. That's the way it is. And complaining about it certainly wouldn't change anything. So why do that? And we just worked. We worked 8 hours solid. And maybe at the end of the day, there might be a little group, some friendly conversation if there's some gossip about the village or on the island or something that might share something that's happening, or some personal loss or tragedy, or someone died, a funeral coming up, or a wedding. Of course, that sort of thing. But essentially, the guys showed up for work, worked hard till lunch, took a fairly quiet half-an-hour lunch, and then finished the day and went home. So I'd say it's about as strong a work ethic as one could imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
And fast. They were all very expedient at what they did, and wasted no strokes. So the boats were built quickly, built well, and everything moved right along.
And I would assume the level of integrity of the people, Nils and the people that worked there, was pretty high too. I mean, that kind of goes along with as far as how they treated their customers and the effort they put in each boat.
They certainly recognized that their reputation was resting on the quality of the boats that they were launching. And there was no such thing as advertising. So the advertising was what they produced and how it functioned once it was out there, and if the customer was pleased, then that was the advertising. Yeah. Word of mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jay, now it's 2015 and we're sitting here and you're still doing this. So tell me about that. Why do you still do this? Why do you like to do it? I know you don't have to do it, you like it.
There is something mesmerizing about picking up a sharp plane and placing a piece of yellow cedar or clear Douglas fir in the vise and working it shaping a piece of wood, there is a relationship with the piece, and the piece of wood will tell you how it can be worked immediately. And you may think you'll be shaping it this way or that, but it has input right from the beginning, and it will dictate what it will accept and how you can work it, and it will cooperate if you're willing to accept its input. And so I find that just fascinating, that every piece of wood has its character, and it comes from the tree. It was a living being once. It was a living plant, and that's how it developed its character when it was alive, and it still has it in the form of a plank or a frame or a keel, and it cannot be ignored or it will fight you. And so I forget that once in a while, but as soon as I get back to working wood, I'm reminded quickly that I'm working with these living parts that are just living another life now as a plank or a frame in a boat. And once the boat is completed, then I've given it life again. And in that lies, I think, the difference between wooden boats and aluminum boats or fiberglass boats. We've taken that living entity and given it life again, if you will. And we know, those of us who build and sail and row wooden boats, understand that there is a feeling, there's a sound, there's a buoyancy on the water in a wooden boat, which is almost inexplicable. It's there, but can you describe it? No, not really. But you can sense it with your eyes closed, and you can hear it, the way the water reacts to the wood.
Interesting. I've never thought of it that way. I like the way you put that the wood has input, because the wood has a certain strength. It has a grain direction. It has knots. It has a twist or a crook. And if you don't work with that, it's not going to work too well. Very cool.
It keeps us humble.
Definitely. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So we come back to that. We come into it with a certain amount of arrogance. We are the creators. We're the builders. Here's the stack of lumber, and we've got the vision and the power and the energy to build this boat. When what we're not thinking about is there's a lot of history right there in that stack of material, which we will get to know in the process of building the boat.
I like that analogy. Very good, Jay. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today again, and we're already planning our next one, so that's fun. Anything else you'd like to say today, Jay?
Thanks for listening.
Okay, very cool. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. We'll be talking soon.
Good.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
You're welcome.
Jay, thanks for taking the time to do the interview. It was great to connect again and catch up on what you've been up to, which is really some cool stuff. I'm pretty jealous, Jay, really. I wish I was up there doing that, but I'm not, and that's okay. But I'm looking forward to connecting with you again in 2 or 3 months and doing another podcast interview and talk about some other cool projects you've been working on. So if you're new to the podcast, you can subscribe to my electronic newsletter by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. It's a free, almost monthly newsletter where I connect with my audience, and it's a lot of fun. And if you want to connect with me by email, you can email me at woodenboatdan@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. If you'd like to support the podcast and you buy products on Amazon, if you go through my link to get to Amazon, I get paid a small commission, which I really appreciate that. The link is hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. So if you make a purchase there, go through that, and that will help me out. I appreciate that a lot. And that's about all I've got to say for this week. A little bit shorter on the intro and outro. But we had fun as usual, so tune in again next week for episode number 157. Have a great week, folks. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden boat down. Over and out. God bless.